Yeah, what was that? Sorry, yeah, Happy New Year for sure, for sure. Happy New Year. Because first episode of 2025, and yeah, it's quick recording underway. So episode 10. Wow. Who'd have thought I'd go that far? So as I'm recording, it's actually those who are watching, it's actually December right now, about 10 days before Christmas. And yeah, but Francis is on this edition of the podcast once again. So it went. Francis came on for episode 6. We actually recorded that in the summer, but it went down so well. I think got a very good response. I think it's actually the second most popular after the first, and the first is usually quite popular because it's the first and people are curious. But yeah, so it went down well, and here we are again, sort of on short notice. But in fact, Francis, I'll let you sort of get the ball rolling in terms of why you've sort of one of the main reasons you've been inspired to come on this time, because I think maybe this one's a bit more well. We'll see what you say actually, because I think this one's going to be a little bit different, arguably more interesting, arguably more relevant to the cultural conversation. But yeah, what sort of basically intrigued you? Let's say the last few months, weeks.
Perfect. Well, and obviously this is the January version. Happy New
Yeah,
Year to everybody.
yeah.
Hope you have the best start to the year possible. And yeah,
Oh,
let's try and
absolutely.
get it in the most inspiring way that we can. Kind of,
Yeah. Start
um,
the year right.
yeah, exactly. Um, I think a big thing that's been you've had things with like it's quite like a sensitive subject, and I kind of bear in mind people who've been in very difficult medical pain with the assisted dying bill, and that has to be sacrosanct. And something that's come to mind is like the value of human life, what the human spirit is capable of, and kind of going back to its original um, purpose. You think when it was created thousands and thousands of years ago, and I talk about like you know we all as humans have a value, a dignity, purpose that's not defined by our pain and circumstances. The circumstances
Mm,
can be like different human trials and suffering. However difficult they are, there's always like a kind of value that goes beyond the practical situation the human's in. I think with this assisted dying bill that came through, I know there's been a lot of talk from people both sides of the um, debate, and if you listen to kind of like MPs, there's some really heartfelt stories of people who've been touched by certain stories with maybe their family member or friend,
mm,
advocating to vote against this bill and the potential for a slippery slope, but also to kind of for some on a human level to vote for it because they maybe saw the harrowing suffering that people went through.
mm.
And this is again like a very sensitive, topic, and I can never speak on a kind of a medical expert. My conversation in this podcast is like my just passion for kind of value and dignity and how you come across something like this. So my concerns and issues with the assisted dying bill, and I just really emphasize it's not really my concern is not for people in the most difficult of human situation. If it's medical pain at a really point where it's a human desire and thought to feel, I want this suffering to end. I want to
Mm.
kind of when you feel very overwhelmed and you feel at the kind of the end, or you tried so many things, um, and it'd be hard on a human level to argue kind of against that. You see someone in that situation, and we don't know what could happen to us tomorrow in 40, 50
Yeah.
years. And that's something we've got to humbly be aware of. So my concerns is not, those individuals, I would say, who knows, like I say, what happened to us in a long time, hopefully not. But that's
Mm,
not where the concern is. The concern is more, I guess, down the line with this, if this vote for assisted dying goes through, what this could open the door to, um, and how strong when it starts to become political and go, well, what
mm,
about this case? What about if you talked just before we went on there about the salami effect, which I found very interesting. But
Yeah.
well, for people with 6 months to live, what about people in who've got 12 months to live or 3 years to live? What about people in very just a lot of physical pain where there isn't a time limit? What about people who are
Mm.
highly depressed in the age of their 20s and 30s, where you open the bill and that is going to have like a in the long run of all these changes do have a they influence society and that embeds into our subconscious over time. Um, yes, to talk about the strongest safeguards. Um, and but I think the concern is how where do you put the line and how are you going to maintain when you have maybe things like very strong, charities or groups that could be pushing or pressurizing or going to kind of like um through the human rights courts to try and justify in theory any different position. I don't know the full ins and outs, but I've heard things in different parts of the world. Something in Canada springs to mind,
Mm.
where the gulf seems to be kind of widening, and this it's just a huge difference. Let's say as attitudes and discussions start to change, what if that person has gone through the most difficult of circumstances? They're isolated, but they've still got value and they've still got resilience. And suddenly,
Mm.
oh, hang on a minute. Do you know, should I be, like, that there's like an internal pressure, or, like where they start to feel a burden, or am I
Mm.
being a drain on the resources or my close people? And it can be subconscious. And even though some people know you're not, but it really does have the change on the attitudes. And when you're in those situations, like the, the kind of mindset and interpretation is huge, and people are extremely vulnerable. So when something goes like that, it can really put people in open up despair. And I think if we're not careful, um, yes, to have free autonomy and choice, you can understand that. And I think there's something that I think a shared thing for people on both sides of it. We all want to see we want to reduce human suffering as much as possible, and we all want the healthcare system, palliative care, to kind of improve. And I think we're talking about some of the most vulnerable. What's to stop, conversations changing, um, and maybe where people are doing the utmost to preserve a life, and then quite a lot of resources where it's so difficult. Um, there's open to different coercive control or kind of like where you start to feel a burden, and that can then lead to, well, why don't I go down this route? And on a human level, you understand, but if we're not careful, in the next generation of people, it
Yeah.
really does, it
Mm.
flips the subconscious. And I think on one case, I think the reason for my concern is not to put forward a political viewpoint. The reason is there have been people in. So I know I'm going a bit of a length, but
No, no, this is good. This is good. This is good. No, it's interesting. It's really interesting.
there's been people in very terminal cases. I think there's one I read through a Chris Stefanik book where he was pretty much paralyzed and a lot of pain, but there was such a peace about, I think he was in Haiti or
Mm.
something, and it really inspired him. He was really taken back. He just, it's almost like on paper, on paper, everything which was as difficult as it could be, that's the situation this person was in. But they had a glow that was hard to maybe comprehend or scientifically explain or understand. And that is what the strength of the human spirit can do. You think of people in maybe the most difficult of war situations, or some people who have gone through like, martyrs. There can be like peace in the most horrendous of situations, and in the most where everything medically that your back's against the wall completely. But there's been also stories where people could have. I think there was. You do have people who are very kind of near, and then have you hear of miraculous turnarounds or recoveries or things that even can be hard to kind of explain. And the human spirit is, and that's what something to not kind of underestimate that because there is a lot of like in our culture, mental health is skyrocketing. We have a lot of people questioning their worth and value on a general basis. Um, a lot of people, in a lot of despair or losing hope, and that's the worry of the shift I've seen kind of recently, and just kind of losing sight of the value and dignity that God, or for people who don't believe in God, the universe put in you. Um, and just that the culture of like free choice of going, well, um, when it could open the door to helplessness is just quite very sad to see, really.
Mm.
Because we all have a value. You do hear, I think, the stories of the human spirit, and people. I think, I feel people are gonna, if they're gonna make these decisions, to hear some of these powerful stories, if it was possible. Because it's very easy to go on just medical on paper or what the political discussions are, but to really hear from people in the most difficult, or people who've got these testimonies, because that is what how capable the human spirit is. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, that's kind of my.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think that I do think that what you were saying then, it just reminded me of something just came to me. I wasn't necessarily going to plan on sharing this, but I remember it really well. Have you ever been to mass or just or church and a homily just stands out to you really well? I remember it. It
Yeah.
was St. David's Day. I think he's the patron saint of Wales. It was 1st of March. And I just
Mm,
remember this homily so, so well. And what I remember it from, it was the priest. Like, I'm not sure what his name was, but he said a line that probably stayed with me for the rest of my life. He said, "When times get darker, our lights shine brighter." And I was just like, whoa, I was blown away by it. And as you're saying, it's we should, yeah, we should never underestimate the human spirit in some sense of yeah, just how strong it can shine. And I do wonder because I guess it comes into question suffering, doesn't it? Because I do wonder how, because obviously, as well as a Christian, we definitely don't believe God inflicts it on us, but I guess we do believe He allows it because it exists. But I guess it just comes into the question of suffering, of what our perception is of it. Because I think that with this sort of assisted suicide, it's perhaps it's this thing of trying to escape suffering, isn't it? I think that's what people aspire to. They want to get rid of it, escape it, and I guess it comes into the question, coming back to that thing when times get darker, I like to shine brighter. I guess it does come into question how I do wonder if the deeper the suffering, the stronger the light shines. I do wonder. It's like if it, for example, if you've got a little small, if you've got a match, just light the match. It's a little small light. If you're in a really bright room, like I've got lights on in here, the lights are on,
mm,
you can hardly tell it's there. It's just like, oh, cool, you got a light. But if this room is pitch black, just that little tiny light, it just shines really, really bright. And so maybe
mm,
I do wonder. Just I guess maybe this people's perception. I think what you said is quite right. I think it does seem there are a lot of people losing hope. A lot of people seem to be suffering significantly. Like it is,
mm,
yeah, it's a very brutal world at the moment, isn't it? And I think people are questioning their worth.
mm,
Yeah, I think I do wonder if what comes into play is our root belief, and if we believe we're made in the image of God, or if we don't. I think if we don't believe we're made in the image of God, then I wonder. I think some people call it the culture of death, don't they? The culture of death, and I think we did touch on that thing about Islamic effect, but I think a big concern that a lot of people have, even people who aren't Christians, I think a lot of people have concern of this is the precedent. What does this lead to? I think you mentioned it, didn't you, about generations down the line and
yeah.
years to come. Is it just who's gonna be moving the goalposts? Are you gonna get the goalposts that are gonna go from corner flag to corner flag? Do you know what I mean? And is it gonna be
Mm,
and is it saying that some people are an inconvenience rather than a blessing? And is it saying that you can only be useful
Yeah,
based on what you can bring to society? Do you know what I mean? It's like I think it's amazing how one bill it's just so many questions and so many conversations. But I do wonder if it stems down to the image of God. It's like, what do you believe we are or we aren't? But yeah, it's just so much to think about in regards to it, really. But yeah, I think you've. What do you think of that, though? Do you think a big part of this is sort of the precedent, what this leads to? Would you say?
yeah, I feel that's the kind of the big concern. I mean, trying to think of an example. If someone's had a, I don't know, so, and I've got to say, like, I've not. There are certain difficult experiences I've not gone through. I have to remind myself, and we have to remind ourselves of that. Um, when someone's in a very debilitating illness or very difficult life situation, it's very easy to get really down. First of all, well, that's obvious, but for you know to get a lot of like um people to kind of feel sorry for the situation, and all the stigma and some of the culture. It's very easy to go into a really difficult place,
Mm.
um, and not necessarily just in assisted dying. I've come across individuals in the care sector, or you've got people um, who need that support, and I'm sure people like you think of carers or doctors who come across vulnerable patients and maybe some of their care for them. There might be initiatives. It may be something as simple as I'm thinking on top of my head here, like people visiting a kids' hospice on Christmas Day, and you see them
Yeah.
and you see people's faces light up, and you know sometimes with the we talked about like suffering, and it's not something you can go on stoicism, but well, if I get to this point, I will not be affected because again, um, feeling that hurt is a human, a real human aspect, but um, it can almost bring you to a kind of a deeper connection with God, with the universe, and almost like strip away what maybe we thought was important. And it is capable of the human mind. That's where it's almost like this like inner strength can naturally come out of like appreciating the smallest things that maybe you wouldn't when you're functioning and everything's okay. And when you see the smiling faces of people in difficult situations by just because of the act of service or charity that's there, or you know, it's that loving family, loving friend. Um, you know, that is an example of like where God working in those difficult situations where um, love and hope can flourish. So that's why I talk about the president, not necessarily the precedent of what it could lead to, not necessarily assisted dying is one of them, but like where if we get that kind of that almost like learned helplessness,
Mm.
um, we're already seeing, you know, like, out being out of work, homeless, poverty, the stigma on that and how it can just bring a person really down what's in already
Yeah.
a difficult situation. And I think that's what really I find most heartbreaking is when the situation is traumatizing enough, and all there's some narrative around it where it gets political. You know, people just want the human spirit just wants hope. It wants whatever that situation is. And if it becomes you know, if we then start to, it's like almost playing God into kind of like assisted.
Yeah, for sure. It's a
What
big
could it open the
danger.
door to? Again, it's
Big
just that
danger.
thing of like learned helplessness, which is one of the most that can have really ramifications in a long time. We want to inspire, you know, next not to say, oh, if you do this, everything, not nothing like that,
Yeah.
but we don't know what life's going to throw at you. But that there is always hope, and sometimes that hope might not be what's on paper or what can be seen. It can be in the unseen. And it's sometimes difficult to communicate that across. Um,
I
Political or
just
science
I
or
just need to
people.
check the I just need to check
Yeah,
the
that's fine.
record and see how long got left. I'll just be 30
Yeah,
seconds.
no problem.
All right, I'm not gonna lie. I'm just about 3 minutes left of the recording, so this has been a very quick one, hasn't it? Indeed. But what you're saying, I'll just put a timer on just so it doesn't suddenly clock out. But
Yeah.
3 minutes to go. I know it's been a quickie this one, but I think short and sweet, that's for sure. But definitely better than nothing. But yeah. So what you're saying is losing hope, wasn't it? That what I do love to say, I love this saying. It's where there's life, there's hope, and as long as there's the, you know, yeah, as long as there's life, there's hope, and if you're not gonna have hope, it's like, what is there? Do you know what I mean? It's And as you said, even if it's not just saying everything's going to be okay, it's just, I wonder if there's just, I know there's just meaning in the journey. Do you know what I mean? In the
Yeah.
journey. And yeah, maybe there is meaning in the suffering. Do you know what I mean? Maybe there
Yeah.
is
And that can
purpose
be
in the
beyond our
suffering.
understanding, and it might not feel, and that's okay. It's something well beyond our understanding.
Yeah, for sure. And also the crucifix, right? The crucifix, it's the symbol of the Christian faith, isn't it? The Catholic faith. And what do you have on there? You've got a man who's suffering deeply. He was betrayed in the middle of the night, one of his closest friends, and crucifix. You know what I mean? He didn't do anything wrong. All he did was help people. He was young, in front of a lot of people, completely innocent. And then crucifixion at the time, it was people die of dehydration, suffocation, exposure to the sun, and if that's the Son of God, the most perfect person, that's what the world did to him.
Yeah.
And it's just beautiful, yeah. But what comes after that, the resurrection. But yeah, perhaps there is meaning in the suffering. Do you know what I mean? It's But the thing is, though, yeah, I know there might be people watching this, and it might be say, "Oh, easy for you to say,"
Mm.
which, yeah, but I don't know what your thoughts are. But there is just a minute left to finish, so yeah, I guess closing. I know I'm rushing through this a bit, so it might seem a bit lopsided in terms of the rhythm, but yeah, last sort of 30 seconds or 40 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, let you finish.
Well, there's that quote, isn't there? I think I'm trying to remember it now from the Bible. It's like neither illness nor death can get in the way of what
Wow.
God's planned for us. It's beyond, again, the most difficult situation beyond our circumstance. And, in short, that's what a lot of life's about. I think that's
Yeah,
if I'm going to end it, that's how I'd probably want to put an ending quote on that,
yeah.
something like that.
So beautiful that, and it's yeah. As long as we're alive, where there's a pulse, there's a purpose. Where there's a pulse, there's a purpose. But I feel it's about to cut at any moment now. But if
No
it does,
worries.
all of a sudden, once again, thank you so much for joining this sort of edition. It's been an interesting one, but more than worth it all the same. But yeah,